right? So get this, Charles Darwin, the father of evolution, right? The guy, he was so obsessed with collecting beetles that one time he shoved one in his mouth.
In his mouth?
Yeah, just to free up his hands for another one.
Wow.
Makes you wonder, what a guy who revolutionized biology, you'd think he'd be a little more organized, right?
Yeah. That's a pretty funny image, though. It really speaks to his passion for the natural world.
Definitely.
Like, even at a young age, he just had this drive to explore and discover.
It's that curiosity that that led him to his famous voyage, right? The one where evolution all started to click for him.
Exactly. We talked about the HMS Beagle.
The Beagle, yeah.
5-year journey around the world. Imagine that.
5 years.
He was only 22 when he set sail.
Wow, 22.
In 1831. I mean, could you imagine yourself at that age leaving everything, to embark on an adventure like that?
I probably would have spent most of my time seasick and, complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi.
Probably me too. But Darwin, he was different. He used that time to really observe and study.
Yeah.
To really try to understand the natural world.
And it was during this voyage, particularly in the Galápagos Islands.
The Galápagos.
Yeah, that's where those ideas about evolution really started to take shape.
The Galápagos were a revelation for him.
I bet.
You see, he noticed that even though the islands were geographically close, they had distinct species of plants and animals.
Really?
Yeah, especially finches, these birds with unique adaptations.
Okay, finches.
Yeah. Some had beaks, perfect for cracking seeds, others for probing flowers, for nectar. It's like each species was perfectly molded to fit its environment.
So he's looking at these finches, and he starts to think, wait a minute, how did this happen?
Right.
And that's where his theory of natural selection starts to come in.
Yeah, this idea that nature essentially selects the traits that help an organism survive and reproduce in its environment.
So survival of the fittest, but not just like the strongest or the fastest. It's more about who's best suited for their surroundings.
Right. Exactly. It's about adaptation. Whoever can adapt the best.
So like during the pandemic, we all had to work from home.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
The people who thrived weren't necessarily the strongest. They were the ones who could adapt.
Exactly. And it just shows that this process is not just something from the past or on some faraway islands.
Yeah.
It's happening all around us all the time, shaping the world we live in.
So Darwin has this breakthrough with the finches.
Yeah.
This like aha moment.
Yeah.
The seeds of his theory are planted, but he doesn't just immediately run and publish his findings, right?
Well, he gets back to England in 1836 after 5 years of seasickness. Let's not forget that.
I can't even imagine.
And all these amazing observations.
Yeah.
And he's got all this information from the Galápagos just swirling around in his mind, trying to wrap his head around it all.
He must have known this was going to be controversial, though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine this is a time when most people believed in the literal biblical creation story.
Yeah.
And here comes Darwin proposing that species evolve over time through a natural process.
Completely contradicting everything people thought they knew.
Exactly.
So he's sitting on this idea that could turn the world upside down.
A real bombshell.
Yeah. Why didn't he shout it from the rooftops? Why did he publish right away?
Well, for one, he was incredibly meticulous.
Okay.
A true scientist. He wanted to be absolutely sure that his theory was airtight.
Yeah.
Backed up by mountains of evidence.
Makes sense.
So he spent years and years compiling data, conducting experiments, really honing his argument.
So he's being cautious, almost hesitant, you could say. Like he knew this was going to cause a stir, and he wasn't quite ready for the fallout.
I think that's a fair assessment. He understood the implications of his work, not just for science, but for society as a whole. He knew this would ignite a firestorm of debate.
Right.
And he was a man who thought very deeply and very carefully about everything he did.
He wasn't one to rush into things. So he's like walking this tightrope, right?
Yeah.
Got this revolutionary theory, but also knows it's going to ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough position to be in.
So what finally pushes him to share his work with the world?
Well, in 1858, he gets this letter.
Oh, a letter. From who?
From a young naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace.
Okay. Never heard of him.
Well, Wallace had independently come up with a very similar theory of evolution.
Really?
And he wanted Darwin's feedback on it.
Wow. So Darwin's just minding his own business and boom.
Right. It was a real turning point.
I bet.
Seeing his ideas reflected in another scientist's work really lit a fire under him.
Yeah, it's like when you're working on something and then suddenly someone else has the same idea.
Right.
You're like, oh no, I got to get this out there.
Exactly. So Darwin knew he had to publish, but he didn't want to just rush it.
Of course not.
He wanted to do it right, present his theory in a way that was both scientifically rigorous and accessible to a wider audience.
So basically, he had to walk this line between being accurate and making sure people understood it.
Right, and that's how On the Origin of Species was born.
And that book, published in 1859, it was a game changer, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A total bombshell.
It must have caused quite a stir.
It did. It shook the foundations of science and society.
Think about it. For centuries, people believed that humans were at the top of the heap,
The pinnacle of creation.
separate from the animal kingdom.
Right, and then Darwin comes along and suggests that humans were actually part of this huge interconnected web of life,
Wow.
descended from common ancestors with other animals.
That must have been a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
It was a radical shift in thinking.
Even today, some people struggle with the idea of evolution.
It's true, but how did the scientific community respond back then?
Yeah. What did other scientists think?
Well, there's a lot of division.
Makes sense.
Some scientists embraced Darwin's ideas wholeheartedly.
Saw them as groundbreaking.
Exactly. They saw it as this revolutionary explanation for the diversity of life on Earth.
Uh-huh.
But others, they clung to traditional beliefs.
They weren't having it.
Yep. They vehemently opposed his theory, argued against his evidence.
So it wasn't like instant widespread acceptance.
No, it was a real battle of ideas, a clash between old and new ways of thinking about the world.
Sounds exciting, actually.
It was a defining moment in the history of science.
For sure.
You see, Darwin's theory wasn't just about biology, it was about our place in the universe.
Our relationship with nature.
Exactly, and it started a conversation that continues to this day.
It wasn't just a scientific debate either.
No, it went way beyond that.
Like into religion and philosophy.
Absolutely. It spilled over into all these different areas.
It had ripple effects everywhere.
It really did. Religious leaders were grappling with the implications for the creation story.
Yeah.
Philosophers were debating the ethical and philosophical consequences of a world governed by natural selection.
It was a huge cultural moment.
It truly was a transformative moment in human thought.
So we've talked about Darwin, the scientist, the revolutionary, the controversial figure. But beyond all that, what was the real impact of his work? How did it change science?
Well, Darwin's theory of evolution wasn't just a new idea. It was a whole new framework, a lens through which we could understand the entire history of life on Earth.
So it wasn't just about what things were.
Right.
It was how they got to be that way.
Exactly. Before Darwin, biology was mainly a descriptive science.
It was categorizing things.
Yeah, putting things in boxes. But after Darwin, it became a historical science.
Trying to understand the processes behind it all.
Yes, seeking to understand how life had unfolded over millions of years.
So those finches in the Galápagos, they weren't just a random observation.
Right.
They were a key that unlocked a whole new way of seeing life.
A paradigm shift.
And that new way of seeing things, it's still shaping our world today.
It absolutely is. Darwin's legacy is all around us.
Yeah, in so many ways.
From the way we develop new medicines to how we conserve endangered species.
It's hard to overstate his influence.
Yeah. His work has even had an impact on fields like computer science and economics.
Really?
Yeah, they use the principles of natural selection to understand complex systems.
So it's not just about biology anymore.
It's everywhere.
It's amazing how one person's curiosity, one person's willingness to challenge the status quo can have such a profound impact.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have the potential to make a difference, to contribute to this ongoing story of discovery and understanding.
Speaking of making a difference, let's talk about Darwin's personal journey.
Okay.
He faced a lot of criticism.
Yay, he did. Despite his work gaining acceptance, he was still a target for people who felt threatened by his ideas.
So even as his ideas were becoming more popular, he was still dealing with backlash.
Yes, his theories were often distorted, and he was personally attacked for challenging religious beliefs.
It's interesting how science and personal beliefs can get so intertwined.
It's true.
It must have been difficult for him to navigate all that.
It was, but thankfully he wasn't alone. He had a circle of friends and colleagues who supported him in his work.
A real support system.
Yes, people like Thomas Huxley, who was known as Darwin's bulldog.
Wow, Darwin's bulldog. That's a great nickname.
They were fierce advocates for evolution, and they played a key role in shaping public opinion.
It just goes to show that even when facing adversity, having a supportive community can make all the difference.
It really does. It highlights the importance of collaboration, of finding people who share your passion and are willing to stand by you no matter what.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. Darwin, the beetle enthusiast. Darwin, the scientist. Darwin, the revolutionary, the controversial figure. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, it has.
But what does it all mean for us, the listeners? What can we take away from Darwin's life and work?
That's a great question, and one that I think Darwin himself would have appreciated.
For me, one of the biggest things is just the power of observation. Like, think about it. Darwin, he wasn't setting out to prove anything specific when he got on that Beagle.
You're right.
He was just curious, observant, open to new ideas. And it was through those simple acts of just noticing and questioning and connecting those dots, that he stumbled onto one of the most profound discoveries in human history.
He paid attention to those tiny details that most people would just overlook.
Absolutely.
Like those subtle variations in the finch beaks.
Yeah, those finches.
Anyone else would have just been like, huh, they're just birds.
Yeah, right.
But for Darwin, those were clues pieces of this giant puzzle that he had to figure out.
It makes you wonder what we're missing out on, just because we aren't paying close enough attention.
Right, like what's right in front of us that we're not seeing.
Yeah, what are our finches, so to speak?
Exactly what amazing discoveries are just waiting for us if we just open our eyes and really look.
And it wasn't just about observing, right? It was also about that willingness to question things.
Yeah.
To challenge the accepted norms, even if it meant, getting laughed at or rejected.
Absolutely. Darwin's ideas weren't exactly met with open arms.
Right. People weren't thrilled.
He faced so much opposition from the scientific community and from people who saw his theories as a threat to their faith.
It's wild how science and personal beliefs can clash like that.
Yeah, it's true.
But he stuck to his guns. He remained committed to his findings, even when it felt like the whole world was against him.
He was a man of conviction.
It takes courage to go against the grain, to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's hard.
It does. It reminds us that progress isn't always easy. Sometimes you have to fight for it.
And it's important to remember, Darwin didn't do it all alone.
That's right.
He had a community around him, a network of scientists and thinkers and supporters.
His own little ecosystem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they all played a part in shaping his ideas and spreading his influence.
They helped amplify his voice.
It shows us the power of collaboration, that we can achieve so much more when we work together, when we share ideas and challenge each other and support each other.
Think of it like this. Darwin's theory wasn't just about the survival of the fittest individuals. It was also about the evolution of ideas.
That's a good point.
The best ideas, just like adaptable organisms, they survive and thrive because they can withstand scrutiny and change with new information and ultimately prove their worth.
So we need to be open to new ideas, even if they make us uncomfortable or challenge our beliefs.
Exactly. Challenge those assumptions. Be willing to debate and let the best ideas rise to the top.
It's like a natural selection of ideas.
Precisely. And in a world that's constantly changing, being able to adapt to evolve our thinking is more crucial than ever.
It's the key to survival.
Darwin's legacy reminds us that learning is a journey, a constant process of discovery and questioning.
There's always more to learn.
Always.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Charles Darwin, let me ask you this. What do you think is the one question Darwin would leave us with? Something for us to really ponder as we continue on our own journeys of discovery.
That's a tough one, but I think he'd probably ask us this. What are you curious about? What mysteries are calling to you? What questions are you brave enough to ask, even if you don't have the answers yet?
That's a great question, and I think it's the perfect note to end on. Don't let that curiosity die out. Embrace the unknown. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to make the next big discovery, to rewrite the textbooks, to leave your own mark on the world.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep evolving.
That's all for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.